Dean Martin was supposed to be in Vegas making thousands of dollars that night, but instead, he was in a children's hospital room singing That's Amore to a little girl who would never see another Christmas. What he did next was so beautiful that even the nurses were crying, and he made them promise never to tell anyone. It was December 15th, 1973, and Dean Martin was at the height of his career. The Dean Martin Show was dominating television ratings. His records were selling millions of copies, and his Vegas performances were earning him more money per night than most people made in a year. At 56, the King of Cool had everything: fame, fortune, and the admiration of millions. But that night, instead of being on stage at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas where he was scheduled to perform, Dean was sitting beside a hospital bed in the pediatric ward of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, holding the hand of a 7-year-old girl named Maria Santos, who was dying of leukemia. Maria had never heard of Dean Martin when she first arrived at the hospital 6 months earlier. Her family had emigrated from Mexico just 2 years before, and they spoke very little English. But Maria's roommate, a little girl named Susan, was obsessed with Dean Martin. She had all his records, and she would play them constantly on her small record player. At first, Maria didn't understand the music. The words were in English, and the style was nothing like what her family listened to at home. But there was something about Dean's voice, something warm and comforting that transcended language barriers. Soon, Maria was humming along to That's Amore and Ain't That a Kick in the Head, even though she didn't know what the words meant. When Susan's treatment was successful and she went home in October, she left her Dean Martin records with Maria as a gift. "These will keep you company," Susan said in her 8-year-old wisdom. "Dean Martin makes everything better." For Maria, whose English was getting better every day, the records became more than just music. They became hope. When the chemotherapy made her sick, she'd listen to Memories Are Made of This. When she was scared about her treatments, Sway would calm her down. When she missed her family, who could only visit on weekends because they were working multiple jobs to pay for her care, Everybody Loves Somebody made her feel less alone. The nurses began to notice that Maria was always happier when Dean Martin was playing. Dr. Patricia Williams, who was overseeing Maria's care, later said, "Music therapy wasn't really a thing back then, but Maria had invented her own version with Dean Martin's voice. It was the only thing that seemed to help her pain." By December, it became clear that Maria's treatment wasn't working. The leukemia was aggressive, and despite months of chemotherapy, it was spreading. Dr. Williams had the heartbreaking task of telling Maria's parents, Roberto and Carmen Santos, that their daughter probably wouldn't live to see the new year. Carmen Santos was devastated, but she was also determined to make her daughter's final days as happy as possible. Through a translator, she asked Dr. Williams a question that seemed impossible. Is there any way Maria could meet Dean Martin? His music is the only thing that makes her smile anymore.
Dr. Williams knew it was a long shot, but she also knew that sometimes miracles happen when you're brave enough to ask for them. Through a series of phone calls, she managed to reach someone who knew someone who worked with Dean Martin's management company. The request made its way through layers of assistants, managers, and publicists until it finally reached Dean himself. He was in his dressing room at NBC, getting ready for a taping of his variety show, when his manager, Mort Wiener, came in with an unusual request. "Dean, there's a little girl in the hospital who's dying, and apparently she's a big fan. The family is asking if you might be able to visit her." Dean barely looked up from adjusting his tie. These kinds of requests came in all the time: sick fans, charity events, publicity opportunities. Most celebrities had their assistants handle them with form letters and autographed photos. "Send her a signed picture and some flowers," Dean said casually. "Dean," Mort continued, She's 7 years old and she's dying. Her family doesn't speak much English, but somehow your music has become the most important thing in her world." Something in Mort's voice made Dean stop what he was doing and look up. His manager wasn't usually one for sentimental appeals, but there was something different about this request. "Tell me more," Dean said quietly. Mort explained about Maria, about how she'd discovered Dean's music through her hospital roommate, about how his songs had become her daily comfort through months of painful treatment, and about how her dying wish was just to meet the man whose voice had carried her through the worst time of her life. Dean was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised everyone. "What hospital?" "Cedars-Sinai, but Dean, you have a show to tape, and then you're supposed to fly to Vegas tonight for—" "Cancel Vegas," Dean said simply. "Dean, that's a $50,000 payday you're walking away from." Dean Martin looked at his manager and said something that revealed the man behind the cool facade. "Mort, some things are more important than money. This little girl needs me more than Vegas does." That night, instead of performing for high rollers in Nevada, Dean Martin quietly slipped into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center through a back entrance. He'd asked for no publicity, no photographers, no press. He just wanted to meet Maria. When he walked into her hospital room, Maria was sleeping. She looked so small in the big hospital bed, her dark hair gone from chemotherapy, her tiny frame dwarfed by medical equipment. Dean's heart broke a little just looking at her. Carmen Santos was sitting beside the bed when Dean walked in. She looked up, not recognizing him at first. After all, she'd never actually seen what Dean Martin looked like. But when he smiled and said softly, "Mrs. Santos, I'm Dean Martin," she burst into tears. Through the translator who'd come with Dean, Carmen explained how much his music meant to Maria, how it was the only thing that could make her daughter smile anymore, how his songs had become her daily comfort through months of painful treatment, and about how her dying wish was just to meet the man whose voice had carried her through the worst time of her life. Dean was moved beyond words. He sat down carefully beside Maria's bed and gently touched her small hand. She woke up slowly, and when she opened her eyes and saw a strange man sitting beside her bed, she looked confused and a little frightened. "Hola, Maria," Dean said softly in his basic Spanish. "Soy Dean Martin." Maria's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked at her mother, then back at Dean, then back at her mother. Slowly, a smile spread across her face, the first real smile the nurses had seen from her in weeks.
"Dean Martin?" she whispered in English. "Real Dean Martin?" "Real Dean Martin," he confirmed with a smile. "I heard you like my music." For the next 3 hours, Dean Martin gave Maria Santos the most private concert of his career. He sang That's Amore in both English and his broken Spanish. He sang Memories Are Made of This while holding her hand. He sang Everybody Loves Somebody and told her that everybody loved her, especially him. But he didn't just sing. He talked to her about her favorite songs, asked her about her family, and told her stories about making records and performing on television. Through the translator, they had real conversations about music, about Mexico, about her dreams, about everything except the fact that she was dying. When Maria got tired, Dean didn't leave. He stayed beside her bed, sometimes singing softly, sometimes just sitting quietly, keeping watch like a guardian angel in a tuxedo. The nurses who witnessed this private concert were amazed, not just by Dean's kindness, but by the transformation in Maria. For the first time in months, she seemed like a normal, happy little girl, instead of a patient fighting for her life. Dr. Williams later said, "I've been in medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened that night. It wasn't just that Dean Martin was famous. It was that he genuinely cared about this little girl. He wasn't performing for her. He was connecting with her, soul to soul. Around midnight, Dean knew he had to leave. Maria was getting sleepy, and he could see that his presence, wonderful as it was also emotionally exhausting for her. As he prepared to go, Maria took his hand and said something in Spanish that the translator almost couldn't repeat because it was so heartbreaking. She says, the translator explained with tears in her eyes, that when she gets to heaven, she's going to tell the angels about you. She's going to teach them your songs so that when you get there someday, they'll know how to welcome you. Dean Martin, the man who was famous for never losing his cool, completely fell apart. He leaned down, kissed Maria's forehead, and whispered, "You're the angel, sweetheart. You're my angel." Before he left, Dean did something that no one expected. He pulled out his wallet and quietly handed Carmen Santos an envelope. Inside was $10,000 in cash, more money than Roberto Santos made in 2 years. "For Maria," Dean said simply, "so she can have anything she wants for Christmas." But Dean wasn't done. He asked Dr. Williams to call him personally with any updates about Maria's condition. He wanted to know how she was doing, and he wanted to know if there was anything else he could do. As he was leaving, Dean made the nurses promise him something. "This never happened," he said. "Maria and her family have enough to deal with without reporters bothering them. This stays between us." For 3 decades, it did stay between them. The nurses, Dr. Williams, the translator, even Mort Viner, they all kept Dean's secret. Because they understood that what they had witnessed wasn't a publicity stunt or a career move. It was a man being truly human, using his fame not for personal gain, but to bring a light into the darkness of a little girl's final days. Maria Santos lived for 6 more weeks after Dean's visit. During those weeks, according to the hospital staff, she was a different child. Happier, more peaceful, more hopeful. She told everyone about her friend Dean Martin and how he had sung just for her. She died on January 28, 1974, holding her mother's hand while That's Amore played softly on her record player. Dr. Williams called Dean personally to tell him the news. According to those who were there, Dean cried openly when he heard that Maria was gone. He attended her funeral, sitting quietly in the back of the small church, and he paid for the entire service without the family knowing.
But this wasn't the only time Dean Martin used his fame to help children who were dying. Over the years, hospital workers and family friends began to notice a pattern. Dean would mysteriously cancel performances or disappear for hours at a time. His excuses were always vague: family commitments, recording sessions, meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. The truth was that Dean had developed an underground network of doctors, nurses, and social workers who would quietly contact him when there was a child who needed hope. Sometimes he would visit hospitals. Sometimes he would arrange for families to attend his concerts for free. Sometimes he would simply send money to help with medical bills. He did this for 30 years, and he never wanted credit for any of it. When reporters occasionally got wind of his hospital visits, his publicists would downplay them or refuse to comment. Dean's standard response was always, "I don't know what you're talking about." It wasn't until after Dean's death in 1995 that the full scope of his secret charity work became known. His family found boxes of letters in his Beverly Hills home, hundreds of thank you notes from families whose lives he had touched, hospital workers who had witnessed his kindness, and children who had been given hope by his presence. One letter from a mother whose son had died of cancer in 1982 read, "Mr. Martin, you will never understand what your visit meant to my Tommy. For 2 hours, he wasn't a sick little boy. He was just a kid listening to his favorite singer. You gave him the most beautiful last memory of his life." Another letter from a nurse at Children's Hospital said, "In 20 years of pediatric nursing, I've seen a lot of celebrities visit sick children. Most of them come with cameras and leave after 10 minutes. You came alone. You stayed for hours, and you never asked for anything in return. You reminded us all why we became nurses in the first place." Dean Martin's daughter, Deanna, later said, "We always knew Dad was generous, but we had no idea how much of himself he gave away. He would come home from these meetings emotionally drained, and now we understand why. He was carrying the weight of all these families' pain, and he was doing it completely alone." The man who built his career on seeming effortlessly cool turned out to be someone who cared so deeply that it literally broke his heart on a regular basis. Behind the smooth smile and casual charm was a person who understood that fame was meaningless unless you used it to help people who were suffering. Jerry Lewis, despite their long estrangement, said after Dean's death, "Dean never wanted to be seen as a saint, but that's exactly what he was. He just hit it better than most people." Frank Sinatra, who knew about some of Dean's charity work, once said, "Dean Martin is the coolest cat I know, but he's also got the warmest heart in show business. He just doesn't want anybody to know about it." The legacy of Dean Martin isn't just his music, his movies, or his television shows. It's the reminder that true coolness isn't about seeming detached from the world's problems. It's about caring so much that you're willing to quietly sacrifice your time, money, and emotional energy to help people who can't help themselves. Maria Santos was just 7 years old when she died, but her story revealed something beautiful about human nature. Sometimes the biggest stars are the ones who shine brightest when no one is looking. Dean Martin taught us that the most powerful performances aren't the ones that happen on stage. They're the ones that happen in hospital rooms, when a famous singer becomes simply a man trying to bring comfort to a dying child. The King of Cool turned out to have the biggest heart in Hollywood. He just never wanted anyone to know about it.